And we are back, everybody. The top 5 of the top 80 albums of the 80s. We finally made it. My good friend Nathaniel Ahart here, and Ryan McGuire is here with us. Thank you so much for being on the show, man. This is going to be so fun. I can't wait.
Thank you so much for having me. We were just talking earlier. I'm just a huge fan of the series, and I can't believe I'm finally making my appearance. So it's
It
an
was
honor.
it was long overdue, man. I mean, I
It
was
was.
thinking, I'm like, if anybody loves the 80s more than Ryan McGuire, I just refuse to believe it. So I'm so glad to have you on. And I just have to say, like, I'm so excited to talk about these albums because while I think, maybe I won't agree 100% on some of the placements, I love all these albums. And I mean, right from I think Sign of the Times onward, I think all these albums are just phenomenal. So I can't wait to talk about this.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be
Yes.
really any surprises necessarily,
Mhm.
but we'll see. I mean, the top 5, they're all classics,
Yeah,
and I'm sure you can kind of guess, but the placements, you never
you never
quite know.
know.
But
Yeah.
uh, but Ryan, it's so great to meet you finally, and can't wait to kick this off, man. So without any,
Feelings mutual.
yeah, without any further ado, let's get right to it. At number 5.
Graceland by Paul Simon from 1986. I mean, yes, this is an absolute classic, and I think Paul Simon's best record in his entire solo career. Obviously, won him the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. And obviously, there might be another album that I think is a little bit better from that year, but I think that this is just absolutely fantastic from top to bottom. Only thing I will say is the production obviously is a little too dated for my taste on this thing. But what is so impressive to me, and I think that this is why this album is so acclaimed on so many levels and made the top 5, is because of the way Paul Simon infused this African world music into his traditional type of songwriting that is unquestionably him. You can't mistake Paul Simon for any other songwriter. And I think just
Yeah.
him going to South Africa at the height of apartheid, which he was met with a lot of criticisms, but still, like, the musicians there really said, like, he used us as much as we used him. And you hear all their beautiful contributions on this album, right from the opening track, "The Boy in the Bubble," which starts with that amazing accordion intro and then just goes onward, and Paul Simon talking about all, these are the days of wonder and like all these things
Mhm.
going on in the world, either good or bad. And of course, Graceland, the title track, is just amazing. And of course, I just love his storytelling on here. I always love that line where he's explaining, like, he's like, my traveling companion is 9 years old. He is the child of my first marriage. And like nobody could pull off a line like that except Paul Simon. It's
Yeah.
so funny and just such a great way them finding like solace in Elvis Presley's old homeland. Brilliant, brilliant track about a lot of lost souls. And of course, I mean, so many great songs in here. I Know What I Know is hysterical, meeting this girl at a party and basically like trying to, like, as he says, who am I to blow against the wind? Trying to like one up each other. Gumboots is hysterical. I love that line where he's like saying, he meets this girl walking down the street. It's like, you and I should make ourselves an institute. Like, his humor is absolutely hysterical on here. Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes is another absolute classic
Mm.
track, especially
Great
with those
song.
African backing vocals, man, at the beginning, and the storytelling about how this guy, like the different perspectives from this rich woman to this poor guy, and how they like kind of perceive social class in ways that you wouldn't expect. It really is such a brilliant song. Um, Obviously, so much stuff on here that's great, but I think to me, and I think to Ryan as well, I think you might have to add a little bit on this. You Can Call
My
Me Al is just one of my favorite Paul Simon. As soon as you hear that synth, and just, I mean,
Yeah.
his lyrics on this thing is so hysterical. I love the line, was walking down the alley, or he's like, he was down the alley with some roly poly bat faced girl.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's such a great song about
Yeah.
middle age malaise, and of course that amazing chorus, "You can be my bodyguard, I can be your long lost pal, I can call you Betty, And Betty, when you call me, you can call me out. I mean, it's just so much fun, so catchy, so memorable. And I just think there are I don't think I like the Crazy Love Volume 2. Very, very dated song. But other than that, I mean, this is an absolutely phenomenal record. I had a bit lower, but I can't argue it being in the top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned most of the great ones, but actually my favorite song on the album is Under African Skies. I think
Ah,
that's just a
yes.
Ooh,
beautiful track. Really love the guitar work on it and how subdued it is, and but just vocally, I think it's one of the greatest melodies on the album. But yeah, You Can Call Me Al. I just have to mention also, like, the music video with Chevy Chase
Chevy
is like
Chase, yeah.
so hilarious, with him doing all the lyrics and Paul Simon just like sitting there or whatever. And then dude, like that song, I remember in the 80s, which I was alive for at the time, like that song, I guess, had me so I loved it so much that I like was gonna write a screenplay about an alligator named Al that like came to life or something, or like hung out with kids.
Wait, so
I swear to
Lyle
God,
Crocodile.
I wish I could
I
find
knew
it.
you were gonna say that, Nathaniel.
Yeah. But thank God it never came to light. So
Yes.
but yes, but yeah, classic album. And what else can you say? I mean, Ryan, I'd love to hear your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much hit the hammer and the nail. It was just one thing I really love about Paul Simon is that not only does he have such diversity in the instrumentals and his vocals, but he has this great sense of humor. And I think I'm going to try not to gush about You Can Call Me Al because I can easily talk about that song for the rest of the video. But um, what I love about that song in particular is that, yeah, there is a very unique sound to it, but also there's so much personality and further exemplified in that music video. The fact that, like, who would think to put Chevy Chase in a music video and just have him mouth the whole song and everything?
You know what?
Yeah.
It's interestingly enough, I think Paul Simon said he hated that video or something.
Oh, really?
Like
I
later
think
on,
so.
he
I
was
think
like,
you're
"Oh."
right.
Yeah. But
Interesting.
still,
Yeah. I love the bass work in that song too. It's so, yeah, so
and then like
good,
there's a
man.
backward tape loop too, like it's Revolver or something.
Yeah. And all the African
yeah.
musicians, man, are just like, it really just inspires you, especially like to see like when he performed live with them, in Africa, and just the making of the album. Yeah, I'd love stuff like that when real true world music is being made. I think so much more of that needs to happen just all the time. So
Absolutely.
this was groundbreaking in that regard, but such great songwriting as well. Paul Simon, one of the best. So
Absolutely.
yeah, great
That's a
pick,
great point
guys.
too.
So now at number 4, So by Peter Gabriel from 1986. Such an amazing album. I mean, just classic from start to finish, from the opener of Red Rain all the way to the closing, which on some versions is In Your Eyes, some it's We Do What We're Told, but
We'll talk about that.
whatever, he changes things up as we were just talking off screen. But oh my God, Sledgehammer alone, one of possibly
Oh my God.
the best songs of the whole decade. I
Oh,
mean,
100%.
That goes without
absolutely.
saying.
Yeah, I think the best music video
Oh, 100%.
possibly of all time.
Yeah.
Incredible, the stop motion, but oh my God, man, just when those horns kick in, and the groove is so good by Tony Levin on the bass. Peter Gabriel has never sounded just more alive vocally. Like his version really of doing like an old soul song is I almost like takes the genre to another level. Like what he does on here, it's like alternative music meets soul music, and it's just brilliant, man. And it's like all the sexual innuendos of being your honeybee and all that stuff. It's so fun.
Throwing
And
around your
then
fruit cage.
yeah. And then, you know, with the background vocalist, that when he's riffing at the end, man, like just hitting those high notes with the yeah. You just want to get so into it, man. It pumps me up every time I
I've
hear it.
been feeding the rhythm. I mean,
Yeah,
oh,
I've been feeling the rhythm. Yeah. Oh, I love it. And then Big Time, you know, following suit in that same kind of style.
not
And
as good, but still great.
not as good,
Yeah.
but still like I love like how ridiculous, like tongue-in-cheek the lyrics are on this, and like just essentially making fun of people that are being thinking that they're big time, you know, having a big pillow for my big fat head and all this
Yeah.
stuff. Like the lyrics are hilarious, man. And
And of course,
so
my
fun.
big,
Yeah.
the bulge. Yeah.
Right. Exactly, man. And another great music video at that. And then along with those just fun romps, you've got like amazing ballads like Don't Give Up featuring Kate Bush, which is just when he gets to the bridge, man,
Oh,
there's nobody vocally that sounds like Peter Gabriel. You know,
so
some would
maybe
say
Phil
Phil
Collins.
Collins, you know,
Yeah.
followed in his shoes,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, that voice is incredible. And then In Your Eyes, man, just one of
Beautiful.
the most beautiful ballads of all time. It makes you want to just, you know, hold up that stereo like John Cusack and profess your love for someone. Just brilliant. And also how it incorporates like Latin rhythm into it, and once again world music, bringing in, you know, the African vocals throughout, and Big Time at the end. Just incredible, man. This is this was in my top 5 for sure, so I'm so glad to see it here. But I can go on and on about it,
Oh,
man. I love it.
dude, so could I, man. Like this was not in my top 5. It was in my top 10, but I'm so happy it made it this high on this list. This is an absolute staple in 80s pop music. And I think, as I was saying, the album from 1986 that I probably think should have won album of the year. I mean, this
Yeah.
album is just incredible. And while I do think, yet again, I think this album would have been a lot higher if it wasn't for how dated some of the sounds are, but the production is still incredible. Like how much is going on in the mix, how well it is contained, how
Mhm.
well it is portrayed. It is, especially Sledgehammer, which is not even just one of the best songs of the decade, it is one of the best songs of all time, period. I mean, just as you said, it's like his version, like lyrically, it's like him writing a Smokey Robinson's song with that stack sound, you know,
Mhm.
especially when the horns come in that verse, you know, saw me around your fruit cage, and you hear
Yeah.
them coming.
Yeah,
But dude,
yeah.
I just, that hook, you, I wanna be your sledgehammer. I mean, you just want to yell it.
Yeah.
It's so good, man, and it's just really one of the most seminal, one of the greatest pop songs of the 80s. I think Peter Gabriel's best track, which is obviously saying a lot considering how amazing from top to bottom this album is. And I
Mhm.
count the version that has We Do What We're Told milligrams 37 at the end,
Mhm.
because I know that they switched around the order with In Your Eyes, and they added the what is it? Is This Is the Picture Excellent Birds with Laurie Anderson, which
Right.
I heard after the fact, like it's okay. I don't think it fits on the album, so that's why I go with the original track listing, and plus that was what he originally intended for.
Right.
But man, I mean, so many great the songs are so fine tuned on here. Just like, even, I mean, Don't Give Up is amazing, and I think Kate Bush is utilized so perfectly
Mhm.
on that chorus. Who he was originally trying to get Dolly Parton, but I think it ended up for the best having Kate Bush on here. But when he gets to the bridge in the song, when he goes, you know, when he hits that full
Mhm.
C, man, I mean, it just blows my damn mind. And I think one of his, like, this actually, like, I think prevented Elton John from like committing suicide again or something. Like, he said that it was such a
Wow.
moving song to him. Yeah, it really was such an incredible piece of work, man. And I think it goes to show just the inherent power of the lyrics, and just the fact that he came all the way from Genesis, right? Which I kind of find to have a lot of like pseudo intellectual nonsense to
Mm.
create something that is so accessible, but something so deep and so in some ways personal. I mean, that voice again, yet again, another great pop song. Just
Mhm.
amazing that the hook on that song. And of course, I mean, Mercy Street is maybe like the darkest song. Well, definitely the darkest song on the whole album. He's like talking about child abuse, and it's like, my goodness, he's not holding back at all on this record. Just a
Yeah.
hauntingly beautiful and heartbreaking song. But I mean, come on, In Your Eyes, yet again, one of the best ballads of all time. And
Mhm.
it's not even my favorite song on the album, as I already discussed, which is what I was saying. But I mean, just when he reaches that pre-chorus, he's like, I reach out on the inside. I mean, it is
Yeah.
one of the greatest build-ups to any chorus. And then, of course, the whole chorus itself is amazing and bringing in those African elements, which I think he did even better than Paul Simon.
Yeah,
My
nothing sounds dated on this album. Like, you were saying like Paul
Yeah,
Simon's
less so
a
for
little
sure.
bit, yeah, definitely less so. And I think I'm sure Lanois had a lot to do with that. I
Oh
mean, such
yeah,
an
yeah.
amazing producer, but yeah, gotta love it, man. So, Brian, you love this one too?
Oh, I love this. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if it was in my top 10, but it had to have been top 15 at least.
Yeah.
Um if not, I gotta go back and change it because now that we're talking about it, I'm just thinking like Sledgehammer and In Your Eyes specifically stick out to me. Of course, we've talked about them already, but I have a weird case where my first exposure to Pete Gabriel was watching Say Anything and seeing the boombox scene,
Mm.
which is iconic now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, that song was very inspirational to me. Also like inspiring my own journey into filmmaking and the arts. And Sledgehammer, I remember hearing that on the radio with my dad, and I'm like, this is such a strange song, but I love it. Like, who did this? And then I'm like, oh, it's the same guy. Then I listened to
Yeah.
the album as a whole, and I'm like, I had that like epiphany. I'm like, this is one of the best. So I don't think it's dated either. I think you definitely feel like the 80s aspect like
Yeah.
sneak in once in a while, but I don't think it takes away from what you were saying, Nathaniel, like how he's able to make it
Mhm.
personal and deep with a
Yeah.
But I
lot of
think
those songs.
it could have been higher for me if it was a little bit more timeless. But I mean,
Yeah.
regardless, this is like a 9 out of 10 for me. I think this album is absolutely incredible,
Same.
and I
Yeah.
think deserves to be this high on the list. Maybe even in the top three. I would have loved to see it even crack that high.
Yeah, 86 was a good year, obviously. So and we're seeing a little bit of a thread here too with the world music and maybe another thread on this next one. So let's see what happens next at number 3. The Joshua Tree by U2 from 1987. Such an amazing album. This is one of my favorites of all time, and I think it's perfectly placed here at number 3. I mean, just from the opening track, Where the Streets Have No Name, one of their most epic songs of their entire catalog. I mean, just the buildup that based on this little recurring riff by The Edge, who really on this album especially has carved out like his own style as a guitarist. No one else sounds like this dude, and he's ever since, even though he went into other territories in the 90s, has never quite strayed completely away from. And I think that all these guys came into their own. Bono, Larry Mullen Jr., Adam Clayton, just giving these songs, a lot of them, room to breathe as like these huge epics, like Where the Streets Have No Name, like I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, which is very gospel influenced, With or Without You, such an amazing ballad that still to this day, like every time I hear that song, especially the ending when Bono goes into that high falsetto and then the band comes back in with that emotionally charged outro. Just the heartbeat of that song is just, it's beautiful, man. Like one of the most haunting, kind of creepy ballads of all time. That also, it's odd that came out in the same decade as Every Breath You Take, because I find those songs kind of similar in a way. But then you've got Bullet the Blue Sky, such a great rocker, showing that U2 is capable of so much even more than what they had on those first three songs. But even if it was just those three singles that lead off the album, it would be amazing. But then you've got Running to Stand Still, another one of their great underrated ballads. Such an amazing song about drug abuse. In God's Country is a really underrated track on side B. It does fall off a little bit on side B. Side A is very front loaded. I would say almost one of the greatest A sides of any album, period. But you've also got great rockers like Exit towards the end of the album that breathe more life in at the end, that I think give it a full rounded experience that is not quite my favorite U2 album, but it's right up there. And for that reason, I think it deserves its space where it is.
Well, interestingly enough, this is what I was saying about slight disagreements, because I had this at like number 30 on my list because of what you were saying. It is so front loaded. Like those three songs are like maybe like some of the absolute best in their catalog, and it's like you're not going to space these out. There's just so much better than everything else, and I love this album. I love a lot of the songs on this album, like the ones you mentioned, both the Blue Sky, of course. You know, I think In God's Country. Actually, I love Exit too. I think is really, really dark and mysterious, and Mothers of the Disappeared is really interesting. But yeah, I mean, the first side is amazing. All absolute classic songs where the streets have no name. As soon as you hear that guitar riff, you know what you're in for. Just that iconic tone. And honestly, I mean, as you were saying about the threads here, Daniel Lanois once again makes this album's production. I have to give the Joshua Tree this over. So absolutely timeless production. You could never tell that this was made in the 80s. And I think it's even better because of that. But really, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Bono's spiritual. So as soon as like this is one of those albums where the first three songs I heard, I'm like, oh, I know this. Like the first time I heard it, when you hear I have climbed the highest mountains. I mean, it is such an amazing spiritual song, and Bono's soaring vocals on the, like when he's like burning desire, you know, like, and you just hear him, but all that grit in his tone, all that passion, all that power. He's looking for some greater power. It could be love, or it could be his, you know, affection for God. I mean, it's such a brilliantly constructed song in that way lyrically that I think it's open for interpretation. But With or Without You, I don't know if it's my favorite U2 song. I think it might be, though. I mean, one of the best ballads of all time, and I just love that line. Sleight of hand and twist of fate, on a bed of nails she makes me wait, and I wait without you. I mean, it's amazing. And you know, I think I find it interesting that you compare it to Every Breath You Take, because I don't think it's necessarily a creepy stalker song. It really is about this guy, and like I think it was about his marriage and how like, you know, it's like you can't live without this person, but there's so many things that just aren't making you two compatible. I said you two, that's kind of weird. But I really think, and I think he's just full voicing it at the end. I know he does a little falsetto thing, but he's going, oh yeah. I mean, it's just incredible. And I just think Bono is such a phenomenal vocalist. I mean, talk about power, man. You got to give it to him there. Totally. But yeah, I mean, and just the political connotations on songs like Bullet the Blue Sky and Mothers of the Disappeared, man, really set this apart from others of its decade. And that's the thing. Like, if it was better structured, I would have this much higher on my list. This is an absolutely classic album, though, regardless. And I get, just for iconography alone, I mean, I understand why it did make the top 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Ryan, look, you've heard this album, yes?
So, John, we were talking earlier about how I got like hints as to what the top 5 would be. And Nathaniel kindly texted me a day ago, and he just goes, "You should probably listen to Joshua Tree to prepare." So nice. I figured it, safe to assume. Yeah. I neglected putting this on my list because I assumed like I hadn't listened to it yet. And as I was listening to it today on my free time, I realized I'm an idiot because I have listened to this before with my dad, but this is like a long time ago.
It is
Yeah.
dad
I-
rock technically.
Yes.
Yeah, like, and my dad's a big U2 fan. Honestly, my dad and my mom are big into them, but
Nice.
listening to it again, I'm just like, I have to agree with you guys. I don't think that this dates at all. I just think
Yeah.
just very beautiful, whether it's the vocals or just I think more so than a lot of musicians, not necessarily on the list, but just in general, they really make their music personal. Like every beat counts.
Mhm.
And Bono's someone, aside from this album, I'm not totally ignorant to U2 either. Like my mom tells me when I was like 2 years old, I used to rock out to like It's a Beautiful Day all the time in the living room. And
Yeah.
then when I was a little older and I saw the Batman movies, they did music for Batman Forever. And
Right.
I'm like 5 years old and I'm like, I know who those guys are.
Yeah. That's cool, man. But well, I'm
this
so
album
glad you
specifically-
enjoyed it though, because yeah, like you both said, it is out of these three we've talked about so far, I think it is the most timeless, possibly the most timeless on the list thus far. But
It's up
that's
there.
debatable.
It's up
I
there.
know you'd probably say
Batman?
Sign of the Times, right?
Close. Well, I mean, I guess I could give points to Joshua Tree. Honestly, I'd give it to Remain in Light though, if anything.
Yeah.
Because it's so far ahead of its time.
Yeah,
Not
out
Batman?
of time. Yeah,
Yeah,
Batman,
literally,
right? That's right. Oh yeah, you were the one that
Yeah.
voted that really high on your list, right?
Yeah, when
made it
Nathaniel
get on
on the
there.
video was like,
Yeah.
Nathaniel just goes, "Oh,
Ryan,
Ryan
we
loves this
did it."
movie." I'm like, "You're not even cutting the mustard right now. You don't know how much I love Batman." So,
You got to dream about it after.
Wow, that's intense, man. Fantastic. Well, now we're at the final two guys. So, what's it gonna be? I mean, you got to kind of have your guesses by now. I'm sure. So here we go at number 2.
Thriller by Michael Jackson.
oh,
Yes, let me just say before we get into this, these number 1 and 2, like with Dark Side of the Moon and Abbey Road, it was not even close. This was
Wow.
often less than 10 points.
This was
And
very
maybe it's
close.
because
oh my
some of our
God.
viewers are sick of this album or something. You know who you are. But
Sure.
this album is I'm just surprised because on the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's Top 100, this was number 3, right under coincidentally Abbey Road and Dark Side of the Moon. So I
Yeah.
would have thought that this would have been number 1. But
Me too.
I did have it in my number 2 on the list under Sign of the Times. And I mean, come on, this album is one, like maybe the most legendary pop album of all time. I'm not
Yes.
saying it's necessarily the best, but it is absolutely one of the best. This album from top to bottom has bangers galore. I mean, come on, just from the beginning of Wanna Be Starting Something, you hear that go boom boom ba-dum, dum, di-da-do-do-dum, di-da-do-dum, di-da-do-do-do-do-do. I mean, and then you get Mike coming in. You wanna be starting something, got to be starting something. Did you wanna be starting something? Got to be starting something.
and then
I
to
mean,
end it with the I'm saying Armando
Marcus, Mama say, Mama say, Mama
Oh my
Marcus.
God.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it's, and then of
Awesome.
course that weird ass thing he's doing. You're a vegetable.
Yeah.
You're a vegetable.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it even
great.
mean? Is he? Anyway, I mean, it's so bizarre, but man, it's such a killer groove, such an iconic track. And that's just to start off the album.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Baby Be Mine. It's good, but literally the rest of this album, The Girl Is Mine, the duet with Paul McCartney, which I know a lot of people write off. I absolutely love it. And maybe it's just because I love Paul so much. He's like my favorite, musical figure of all time. But the thing is, it just shows just how impressive like his range is, because you hear him like hitting like high C's and like just
Mhm.
notes like even out of his range on like songs like Oh Darling. And then you hear this, he's like hitting like a low B flat. And it's like,
Yeah.
my goodness, this man's range back in the day was like unparalleled. I don't think anybody had as much range as Paul McCartney, but just them fighting over like this fictional girl is just so funny to me, especially considering, who Michael Jackson is. It's just
And
hysterical.
especially that they ended up fighting over rights of the music later.
Beatles,
I'm
I'm gonna buy all your songs, Paul.
right. Yeah.
But it's just what a great duet, and it's so much fun. And then of course the title track, Thriller. I mean, so iconic. We're talking about all-time music videos. That's got to be right near the top with Sledgehammer.
Right.
So iconic. And John Landis coming in doing the makeup from American Werewolf in London. Or
Mhm.
John Landis directing, and Rick Baker obviously coming in. My apologies. But I mean, such an iconic, and the fact that I mean the features, we already talked about Paul McCartney. They got Vincent Price
Yeah.
to do the voice on that. I mean, who would have thought to do that except Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones, man? Incredible. And then of course you get to Beat It, which is one of the not one of the greatest pop songs from the 80s, one of the greatest songs of all time. Basically, Michael Jackson's as close as you can get to a rock and roll song from him. And yet again, Eddie Van Halen shredding that guitar solo, which he originally offered to Pete Townsend, but I'm so glad Pete led him to Eddie, because I mean, it makes the song, honestly, when you get to the end. Of course, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it, so I'm on the beat it, beat it. I mean, it's just what an amazing track. One of the best pop songs of all time. And then, I mean, my goodness, this thing keeps going on with Billie Jean, which I might even go as far to say is the best song from the 80s, hands down.
I think it's the best on this album for sure.
Yeah, it's the greatest pop song of all time if we're talking about within this vein. And
Probably
course,
so. And what a way to introduce like a dance move, you know?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yes, him tearing up the stage live. Oh my
god, yeah.
Absolutely insane. I mean, the world shifted that day when he did the moonwalk. And I mean, this song is just lyrically, this is Michael Jackson's best song too, talking about this girl who's accusing him of having her child, and then he starts to question it. And like the eyes are like mine, oh no, you know, it's just so much fun, and just such a killer groove. I mean, how can you not love this song? This is literally a masterpiece.
And speaking of the groove,
really
I don't mean to interrupt, but like whenever anybody says like, you know, Michael Jackson wasn't a musical genius, it's like, no, when you realize like he came up with those grooves like with his mouth, and like just the music of it, and then, you know, Quincy Jones figured out how to do the accompaniment. It's like mind-blowing, man, just the bass groove alone. But he just orchestrated it all out of his mind and made this brilliant song. So yeah.
And then it doesn't even end there. I mean, not my favorite, because I think it is a bit dated, but Human Nature. The synths on it don't sound too great today. But it's still catchy, you know. Looking out across the one time, you know, and just the way he delivers it. Let me take a bite, you know. I mean, just his voice, one of the greatest vocalists of all time, and I think just the control in the brevity he has on the song is absolutely incredible. But then PYT, Pretty Young Thing. I mean, come on, talk about grooves and you know, and just him getting into the song, that chorus. I want to love you, pretty young thing, PYT. You know, just amazing. And The Lady in My Life, I just think is a wonderful ballad, and I don't think you could have closed out this album any better than that. I mean, they really took that blueprint from Off the Wall and knew how to launch it to greater success and really create the best-selling album of all time. And it's not hard to see why, because I mean, there's no album that was more successful. I mean, in the charts, I mean, there were like 7 top 10 hits from this, and I don't know how many of them reached number 1. I'd probably assume more than half of them. But this really is one of the most iconic landmark albums of all time. And I think just objectively speaking, I think it probably should be number 1 just because of its status in popular culture. But we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I couldn't argue that. I mean, I can't remember quite where I had. I know it was in my top 10 for sure.
Yeah. I don't know how it couldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, come on, just on the popularity spectrum alone. I mean, this was just, I think, still technically the best-selling album of all time, right? So yeah, I mean, and it really deserves its spot. So yeah, I can't say any more than you did, man.
I can't wait to hear what Ryan has to say about this stuff.
Yeah,
it's tough. You hit all the big things. I mean, first of all, I want to start by saying the fact that you had all these huge names attached to it. Of course, John Landis directing the music video, which I'm not sure if it was him or MJ, but I think they didn't want to label it as a music video. They wanted it to be
Right.
something else.
Like a short film. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it kind of functions as a short film too. And Rick Baker doing the makeup, that's one of my favorite music videos too. But
Yeah.
uh, I I'm gonna try and condense it because I can say a lot. But
Yeah.
Thriller, one of my all-time favorite songs, just in general. The title track, it's become synonymous with this time of year as well, spooky season and Halloween,
Right.
deservedly so. Vincent Price and then Quincy Jones being involved. I have to say though, all these greats, Thriller, Billie Jean, PYT is honestly my all-time favorite.
Nice.
It's up there. I
Yeah.
mean, I totally don't dance to this by myself in my room.
Oh,
No,
I know you do. I've probably seen you do it, not
I
by
just
yourself.
it's just so soulful. To me,
Yeah.
it's one of those songs where if you watch a movie and it works, people go like, "This is cinema." To me, I'm like, "This is music. This is like
Yeah.
everything I want in a song." So
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good groove. We were just actually listening to that particular song on a mix on the way back from our trip today. And I was just like, yeah, man, teeth out groove. Like, yeah. Gotta love it, man.
Like,
so good.
repeat after me, you're saying na na na. You know, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
dude, amazing song. I will say though, I think that this album is a little bit dated because of the 80s sounds, which is why I didn't have it at number one.
Yeah,
Which
me
I
too.
guess
But it's so good at the same time.
right.
Right.
No, absolutely. I mean, this,
Yeah.
I would rate this over so easily, like any
Yeah.
day of the week, without question. I mean, just amazing that this album isn't even in my top 50 of all time because it is just absolutely an amazing record. And yeah, shocked it didn't make number one.
Yeah. So now
I'm baffled.
come on. What is number one?
Purple Rain.
Oh my God.
Rain. I mean, yeah, Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. I'm sure a lot of you were shocked that this is number one, but man, I had this in my top 10. It was number 10, but if you throw the argument at me, like what album's better between Thriller and Purple Rain, I will always go Thriller, like 100% of the time. But I do feel it's fitting that Prince is number one, considering he is the best artist from the 80s, I think, without question. And also, I mean, the fact that he also has tied for 3 albums on this list with John Williams and Madonna and Talking Heads. So, I mean, nobody deserves it more than Prince, I think. I mean, just opening this album with Let's Go Crazy with the synths and that sermon, the Dearly Beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing we call life.
Yeah.
And just the religious undertones of the song, where he's like talking about, you know, if the elevator tries to break you down, go crazy, you know, kind of standing in for the devil, and just basically saying like, while you have the time here, like, do the best that you can with it. And I mean, just such a killer, you know, such a killer group that din 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 din. And I mean, obviously,
the guitar solo at the end.
Guitar solo from Prince at the end is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
One of the best songs from the 80s. And of course, like he's like talking about like, look for the purple banana till they put us in the truck. Like, what is the purple banana? I don't know, but I'm not going to question it because this is like one of the greatest pop songs from the 80s, and maybe you could argue all time. And then that goes right into Take Me With You, which I love it. It took a while to grow on me because it is pretty straightforward, but I mean, just I love that hook, you know, just take me with you, you know, it's just so much fun. And I don't care if we spend the night in your mansion, you know, from, you know, the backing vocals from the Revolution there. So great. And then of course, my goodness, the Beautiful Ones is one of the absolute stunners on this album.
Love that,
you know,
song. Yeah.
Baby, 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 is it him or is it me tonight? But dude, like when he's at the end, like screaming at her, do you want him or do you want me? Because I want you. Just absolutely amazing, and especially in the movie itself, which I'm not particularly huge on, because this album is way better in every single way. I mean, just crazy. No one could scream like Prince, and I think that this song is maybe the best example of that. And of course, I mean, so many great songs. Darling Nikki, gotta talk about that song. How he basically pissed Tipper Gore off, and then basically got the parental guidance, you know, the label slapped on any album that had explicit lyrics from there on
Mhm.
after, which I think just shows you how much of a baller Prince was, and also just how influential he was at the same. I mean, talking about, I knew this girl named Nikki. I guess you could say she was a sex fiend. Met her in a hotel lobby, masturbating to a magazine. I mean, this dude did not give a shit, and it is
Mhm.
so great because of that. And then, of course, I mean, get to side B, with the iconic baseless classic When Doves Cry, just proof that you can create a great groove even without a bass line. And I mean, I think lyrically, probably the strongest song on here, talking about this kind of like, kind of trying to figure out whether, your parents, the way they raise you is kind of their traits are developing into your own personal life and in your interpersonal relationships. It's just an absolutely brilliant song in Prince catalog. I think one of his absolute best. Not huge on I Would Die For You, and this is another reason why. I'll get into it in a little bit. Baby I'm a Star, though, I absolutely love. Which, especially in the movie, his performance of it is off the chain. Like, people talk about how great of an entertainer Michael Jackson was, but Prince, man, he was almost right there. I mean, that dude could
Yeah.
tear one on stage. But of course, I mean, the title track might be Prince's best song, and I mean, just so lush. I mean, just bring you in with that just that light, guitar strum at the beginning, and then drawing you into this beautiful magnum opus of a song. It's all about feeling. I think the song more
Mhm.
than the lyrics themselves, which do serve a great purpose. But I mean, it's just the sound, and then of course, I mean, one of the closest, probably Prince's best quote unquote gospel song, with those backing vocals coming in the second chorus, purple rain, purple rain. And then of course, to me, I think one of Prince's greatest moments, lyric or vocally, is at the end where he's going, that whole thing. And then of course breaks out in that amazing guitar solo at the end, which just brings the song back around. I mean, it's almost 9 minutes of absolute ecstasy. One of the
Yeah.
greatest songs of all time. And I think one of the greatest, and the fact that this isn't my favorite Prince album, it's actually my third favorite Prince album, which I know is probably shocking for a lot
Third
of people.
favorite.
Yeah, I like the Black Album more, but I'm sure
Oh,
we
gotcha.
might get in that at some other time, as I've already talked about it before. But I mean, this album, the reason why I would not rate it as high as I had So above Purple Rain, and I think a lot of the reason is the production, but also I just think, like, lyrically, as I was saying, some of these songs are incredible, but I feel like he wasn't reaching the level he would later on, and I think as classic as a lot of these songs are, and I like Computer Blue a lot. It's cool, like the synthy stuff he's doing and the instrumentals on it. I don't think it really holds a lot of water compared to some of these other tracks. And I think I Would Die For You is just kind of like monotonous and repetitive.
Yeah, it does get
Okay.
repetitive. Yeah.
It's not bad or anything. I mean, there's not a bad song on this album, but the highs on this thing are just absolutely incredible. And I think that this brings up an interesting discussion, which I will save until you guys talk about this album, because I don't want to hijack this whole conversation.
Too late. I have nothing more to add. You've said it all, man. Seriously. But Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Nathaniel, we definitely covered a lot of grounds, but one thing I will say is that Thriller was my number two. Of course,
Yeah.
number one was Batman. But
Yeah.
I have to say, as much as I was expecting Thriller to be number one, and just how iconic everything about that album is and the
Yeah.
process of making it, Nathaniel, you and I have talked about this before, but the older I've gotten, the more mature, I guess, whatever word I'd like to use. I do think Prince was the better artist overall, just in terms of the work that he put into it, in terms of, and also MJ was a great entertainer, but I think as an artist, Prince was better.
Yeah.
And this album is easily one of his best, next to Sign of the Times, which I think that's still my favorite, but Purple Rain's up there. And as much as I love PYT, and that was my favorite song from that album, I think Let's Go Crazy Alone, maybe the greatest start to any album. Just it sets up the tone. It gets you jazzed for like what's next, and it's like, I think it's a perfect song. And that's one I actually think I listen to that even more than I do PYT. So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not that, I can't have too extreme of a reaction because it makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. That's true. And that is true. It is one of the greatest opening tracks. And I remember like just rewinding that on a cassette tape over and over again when I had it back in the day. Even though, yeah, I mean, there's so many great, just the title track alone. And to see his performance of that at the Super Bowl was like
Oh,
iconic and
the
amazing
best
Oh my
with
God.
the rain coming down.
Oh my
Come
goodness.
on, man. But yeah, just one of
And-
the greatest artists ever.
Sure.
One of the greatest guitarists and singer songwriters. I mean, in some ways, underrated still at this point.
I don't know.
You know, but yeah, this album actually is my favorite out of them
Okay.
all.
Wow.
And it was only, I think, also my number 10 on my list. So
What do you know? That's
but,
interesting.
yeah.
It made number one. Which
Yeah.
I also, before we get into that discussion, I just want to tell, like, just we are talking about how great of musician Prince was. I know someone, his name is Todd Harriman, and Ryan was there for the story because he worked on Sign of the Times with Prince, and he was talking about how like he would go home at 1 a.m. and then like at 3 Prince would call and be like, "Hey Todd, I need you in the studio." So of course Prince calls you at 3 a.m. in the morning. You got to go to the studio. And he was like talking about how he was like just started laying down a drum groove, and then he started playing the bass, started doing the guitar. He calls in Eric Leeds and he starts playing sax and stuff. And fast forward, this was like Friday night. Fast forward to Monday, they finish the song and then they release it under this band called Madhouse 8, and it doesn't even go towards any Prince output, which just
Wow.
shows you how prolific he was. And Todd asked him, and I think that this is one of like the greatest insights I've ever heard from any artist. He asked him, it's like, well, Prince, like you have all these ideas in your head, like how do you like remember all these songs? And he said to him, he said, "That's the thing, Todd. If God gives me a groove, I can't just throw it away." And
Yeah.
like that to me is just so amazing how he felt like music was his calling, like
Right.
this was something, a god-given thing, like God is speaking through him and
Yeah.
he needs to put it out there to the world. I just think one of the most beautiful stories I think I've ever heard about an artist from, you know, really a firsthand source.
Right.
I just think it is amazing, and I think proves why he was like the greatest musician who ever lived. Really, I mean, that man did everything, and just on, I mean, he played almost every instrument on Sign of the Times. I know we were talking about
Mhm.
that last time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
my goodness.
Incredible. Well,
And-
well
and-
deserved number 1, man.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
you know?
but I think this begs the question, and I want something I wanted to ask, like, do you think Purple Rain's iconography has surpassed Thriller's? Because look at this. I mean, Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums wrote, or it rated that above Thriller. It was number 8 and Thriller was like number 12. And on top of that, and maybe this has to do with Michael Jackson's legacy being called into question. I don't know. What do you guys think? Because I think that this is a very interesting discussion to have.
I think that may be part of it as time goes by. You know, MJ's legacy, I think, definitely has been tarnished. Although, me personally, I can separate myself from the music when I
agree.
listen to it. But that, and then also Prince's stock has risen in a way, I suppose, over the years. So, yeah, I think right now we're probably right on with this list with what the general consensus is currently, but who knows, you know, another 40 years from now could change again. I don't know.
Oh, what do you think, Ryan?
It's definitely tough because they're both iconic and have had their, not just the artists, but these albums specifically have made their impact. And I wouldn't even just say music, pop culture in general.
Oh, 100%.
If anything, though, Purple Rain, I think Purple Rain right now, again, because of MJ's reputation, I think that it has a bit more, maybe not staying power is the right way to put it, but I think people are starting to appreciate a bit more of what Prince was going for, whereas Thriller, because of like any sort of controversial topics that surround MJ's name and stuff like that, I think the only thing that it has going for it as far as like what people are celebrating is Thriller because of Halloween and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I don't know,
Billie
'cause-
Jean is respected too.
Right.
So
Well,
I
also
feel
like,
that too. Yeah.
sure, but it still is like the best-selling album of all time, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
changing anytime soon. And people still like, I think Ryan agrees with me. Like I think it's better than Purple Rain, quite honestly. So I just
Mhm.
wonder, like, it was so close though. That's the thing. Like it was
Yeah.
like so minuscule. It was unbelievable. I've never
Yeah,
seen
I
a race
actually,
like
and yeah, Thriller was number one up until like the final person that sent their list in just
yeah,
changed it overnight. So I was like,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was kind of
So
cool actually. I was like,
it was nail
but
biting. It
yeah,
really
yeah,
was. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, but then
yeah,
considering everything we said, I guess I'm not
yeah.
super surprised. But before we wrap up here, we definitely have to talk about some snubs because we're not going to make a whole episode about it because
No, yeah, it's
you know,
not. There's not as many as the '70s for sure.
right.
But I only have three quick things to say on that.
Mhm.
The one that I'm most disappointed about is that the Blues Brothers soundtrack did not make the list, which I
Ooh.
think is one of the greatest soundtracks of all
Mhm.
time. Just incredible, especially all the guest spots like
Like
James
Aretha, yeah.
Brown, Aretha, Ray Charles. But also, I feel like the Blues Brothers themselves and the band was massively talented. But yeah, so that I was very sad by.
Give me
Uh,
some love and
so great, man. Right? I know. And then I was surprised that Kick by INXS did not make the list because
Mhm.
that was so popular and had so many hits on it. I know Nathaniel hadn't gotten to it
Yeah,
himself yet,
unfortunately, I
but
wanted to.
but that was on my list also. I wasn't like super sad by it, but there's a few songs on there that I absolutely love and still listen to all the time. And then I was also kind of surprised that nothing by Hall and Oates made it, since not I wasn't like super surprised
Yeah.
since Huey Lewis was like really low on the list, and a lot of people compare those kind of groups together. But Hall and Oates, I think, are really underrated. Man, they had some killer songs
Sure.
in the '80s. Maybe not the best albums overall, and
Mhm.
that might be
Yeah.
why. But yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Sure. Well, there's one album that I'm really mad about not making the list, and it's
Mhm.
about the artist we literally just talked about. Because I mean, it would make sense to have the most albums like the Beatles or Pink Floyd did in the '70s, but "Dirty Mind" by Prince, I think,
Mhm.
is absolute crime that it did not make the list because this album is so influential in regards to the sexual explicitity of the lyrics. Him talking about like being like talking about like oral sex, talking about incest at one point, which I'm not, necessarily a fan of that song, but like the stuff he was breaking so many barriers lyrically, and so, of course, that androgynous album cover. And I just think some killer synth grooves, and just throughout the whole album, yet again, he performed all of it by himself. I just think it's an absolute crime considering how much his lyrics pushed forward the kind of sexual nature that was going on with lyricism as time went on. And obviously we've seen what it's kind of devolved into now, but I think just on that alone it deserved to be on the list, and I can't believe it was left off. I for the life of me I don't know why. And also I think Can't Stop Now, or Can't Stop, or Can't Slow Down, I'm sorry, by Lionel Richie. I thought Lionel Richie could have made the list. I love
Sure.
that album. Has so many, it's like a mini version of Thriller, you could even say. So a little disappointed, but I think really I was upset about Dirty Mind. Like, come on, guys, if you haven't
Yeah.
heard this album, gotta check it out. I mean, it was the first great Prince record. I think it really made him Prince.
Overall,
Anyway,
though, I think the list turned out pretty great. Like
yeah,
for the most
Yeah.
part, was pretty solid. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I was on call with Nathaniel one time, and then of course when we've had class together, we've talked about this, but even if maybe like the three of us like won't necessarily agree with the order of the way things go,
yeah.
like I wouldn't take away most of these albums. I think like
Yeah.
it makes sense that a lot of these would be on there.
Take away a
Yeah.
couple, but
Sure, sure.
regardless, I also have to say, Ryan, thank you for
Yeah,
coming
man.
on to this episode here. And if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you're on social media, just hit me up.
Oh,
I'm gonna put my name like I'm some random Twitch streamer.
and he's
But
on
Yeah.
YouTube at Ridge Cinema, and I'm thinking he's going to
Rage
make a
Cinema.
Halloween video very soon, and I want to see
Nice.
that
Oh
come
yeah.
to fruition here.
My all-time favorite movie. So
Awesome, man.
ready.
Can't wait to see that. Well, yeah, definitely check him out. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. And yeah, guys, this was another just epic list, and we are not stopping from here, guys. The top 90 of the 90s is coming next. So get those lists in. You have until October 20th. So 10, well, no, when this posts, you only have a few more days to do it. So get them in as soon as you can. The usual ways that you can do it. And guys, we will see you then. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And of course, as always, check out Nathaniel's channel as well. And we will see you there.
Bye, guys.